I remember the first time I drove down that stretch of highway just past midnight. The fog was thick, curling around the trees like pale fingers reaching for the asphalt, and every car light ahead flickered like it was struggling to cut through. The darkness. The silence was almost tactile, broken only by the soft hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves brushing against the guardrail. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint echo of tires on wet pavement, though. No car was ever close. I passed abandoned rest stops and broken signs, their messages half swallowed by shadow, half by peeling paint. Something about this road felt alive, as if it was waiting, patient and unyielding. My chest tightened when I saw shapes moving in the fog along thin shadows that didn't belong to trees or posts. I told myself it was just tricks of the light. Just my imagination, but I knew better. Every instinct screamed that the highway had a memory, and it was watching me. That's when I saw it. The night was unusually still, the kind of still that presses against your skin and seeps into your chest. I was driving, alone, on a road lined with old oaks, their branches scratching at the fog. The streetlights flickered. A soft rhythm, uneven, almost deliberate. I leaned forward, squinting through the mist. It felt like a code, pulses of light that whispered, though I didn't understand the language. The fog thickened. It rolled over the asphalt in lazy waves, curling around the tires, climbing the mirrors. Everything looked softer, and at the same time, wrong. The road seemed longer than it should be. The yellow lines stretched and shivered beneath the dim light. I tried to focus on the engine. The hum was steady at first, then it warped, a trembling undercurrent, a resonance that felt too deliberate, like the car itself was listening. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision. They weren't consistent with the trees or the slight rise of the hills. Something was stretching across the asphalt, just out of reach. Every time I turned the wheel, it mirrored me. Soft, deliberate, patient. The air smelled damp, like rain had passed hours ago, leaving only the memory of wet earth. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, but it was more reflex than thought. The fog pressed against the windshield, pale light cutting through it in fragmented beams. I noticed the rhythm of the flickering streetlights again. It seemed to match my heartbeat now, each blink a soft echo in the chest. I wanted to slow down. I wanted to stop, but stopping felt dangerous. The road seemed narrower with each passing second. The branches now leaned closer, fingers of shadow, brushing against the edges of the headlights, rustling, soft, like whispers along the shoulders of the road. A shiver crawled up my spine. The engine's hum faltered again, stretching into a low groan that felt alive. I tried to count the lights, just to anchor myself. 1, 2, 3. But the pattern shifted. Blink, blink, blink. It was communicating in pauses and flickers, or imitating me. The temperature dropped. A sharp bite through the heater's weak warmth. Breath fogged against the window. And in that mist, I thought I saw a figure, not fully formed, just a shadow that leaned, and then disappeared. Told myself it was imagination, the fatigue of driving late, but the road, it wasn't letting me believe that. It twisted in ways I didn't recognize, markings and dips that hadn't been there before. I could feel it in my bones, the road watching, waiting. I blinked, and the shadow was closer. Mirrored in the rear view, a dark shape against the pale. Flickering lights. It didn't move like a person. It moved like a memory. Like a thought I shouldn't have. The hum of the engine changed again. Now high, tense, quivering. It resonated inside the ribs, inside the fog that now pressed into the cabin itself. The air smelled of wet concrete, electric and sharp. I wanted to roll down the windows. I wanted to breathe, free of this thick, knowing fog. But the fear, inertia, it held me. The shadows lengthened. Each tree, each dip in the road, bending toward me. I realized I wasn't alone. The whispering rhythm of the lights, the muted echoes of my engine, they were not mine alone. I slowed, almost imperceptibly, and in the pause, the fog sighed. Or maybe it whispered my name. Soft, breathy, curling through the windows that weren't open. I wanted to answer. I wanted to scream, but the voice lingered, stretched thin across the asphalt. A single, echoing syllable, almost familiar, almost a warning. I kept driving. The road unspooling endlessly beneath trembling headlights. The fog hugged me tighter. The rhythm of light pulsed around me, matching my pulse, my fear, my breath. And somewhere behind it all, a soft, inhuman echo repeated. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whisper followed anyway. The highway stretched endlessly, empty under the pale wash of moonlight. Trees leaned close to the asphalt, their shadows long and restless. The air was cool, damp, carrying the faint smell of wet earth and pine. I felt the hum of the engine beneath my hands, steady, grounding, until it wavered. A figure appeared. At first, just a shape in the roadside shadows, then a hand raised, small, deliberate. The rain earlier had left the shoulders soft, mud clinging. 2 boots that whispered against the gravel. I slowed. The figure waited, silent, watching. Something about the posture. It was patient, yet to knowing. I passed, hesitated, then circled back. The headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the mud again, but the figure was gone. No trace of movement, no echo of a footstep. I froze, and then I saw IT prints, muddy, half-formed, leading to the edge of the trees. They stopped there, as though someone had simply vanished into the watching dark. The forest seemed to shift, alive. Branches whispered in the fog. Leaves rustled softly, brushing against the windless night. A pulse of unease grew in my chest. Matching the stutter of my own breath, I leaned forward, straining to see beyond the pale light. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, yet the weight of eyes pressed from every shadowed tree. I tried to reason. Maybe a traveler, hiding, maybe a trick of the mud, a fleeting imagination. But the forest denied it. It watched in silence, waiting. I started driving again. Each turn brought only more shadows, more fog curling along the asphalt like slow fingers. The prints haunted the roadside, in memory. A trail that led nowhere but into the hush of trees. I could feel the earth beneath, soft and damp, as if it remembered every footstep. The smell of pine grew sharp, almost bitter, and the air carried a faint metallic tang I could not place. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road stretched empty, but a shadow lingered in the periphery, a dark pulse against the dim glow, not moving yet. Present. The night held me in its quiet tension. Every tree seemed to lean closer, every rustle a whispered warning. I tried to breathe normally, but my chest felt heavy, my hands sticky with imagined moisture. I told myself I should leave it, drive until the forest thinned, until the road was empty again. But even as I drove, I felt it, a presence folded into the mist, soft steps echoing just beyond sight. The prints stayed in my mind. They didn't end with the trees. They lingered, like a question the night refused to answer. And then, silence. Heavy, dense, filled with waiting. The kind of silence that shifts the air, makes your pulse audible in the cabin, makes the fog seem almost sentiient. I kept driving, the highway unraveling beneath trembling headlights, the forest receding, just enough to breathe. But somewhere back there, beyond the trees and the fog, the waiting remained, always waiting. The night was thick, fog curling along the edges of the road. Trees pressed close, their branches scraping against the sky. The air was damp, sharp with the scent of wet earth. I was alone in the car, the hum of the engine steady, comforting, until it wasn't. The radio flickered. A burst of static filled the cabin, high, tense, like it had teeth. Then words, faint, broken, layered under. The hiss. Turn back, over and over, through every station. Each voice a little different. Some softer, almost pleading. Some harder, cutting through the hum. I tried to switch stations. Nothing changed. Every dial brought the same whisper, the same insistence, threading through the static dot outside. The lights seemed alive, flickering in time with the radio, pulsing with the rhythm of the words. The fog shivered around the beams, wrapping the car in pale, trembling fingers. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. Cold sweat pricked my neck. I could feel the fog pressing against the glass, heavy, almost tactile, like it wanted me to touch it. Something moved in the woods. A flicker of shadow, eyes that gleamed and held me. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt the weight of them, watching, waiting. The voices grew more insistent. Turn back, turn back. It wasn't just the radio anymore. It was inside my head, sliding into the rhythm of my heartbeat. I slowed. The headlights carved pale paths through the fog. Every bend revealed more shadows, more eyes caught in the reflection of wet leaves. The air smelled of wet pine and something metallic, almost blood-like. Carried on the wind, I wanted to speak. Wanted to ask if someone was there, but the words lodged in my throat, replaced by the hum of the engine and the pulsing lights. The static grew thicker, dense, wrapping around my thoughts. Each whisper tugged, pulling me toward the trees that leaned in close, their branches brushing the roof as if they could reach inside. I pressed my foot down, but the road felt wrong, curved too sharply, stretched too long. The fog thickened with every heartbeat. Every shadow lingered longer than it should. The voices and lights and watching eyes became one. A rhythm that pulsed through the car, through my chest, into my stomach. I realized I wasn't just hearing it. I was part of it. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind was empty, but the fog moved differently there. It shifted with intent, like the trees themselves leaned closer to see me. I kept driving, slowly, carefully. Every so often, the whispers faded, leaving silence so complete it pressed against my ears. Then they returned, softer this time, and the lights outside throbbed again, slow, deliberate, in time with my pulse. I wanted the voices to stop. I wanted the fog to thin. I wanted to leave, but the road stretched endlessly, and the eyes in the woods never blinked. Eventually, the whispers softened to a murmur. The lights flickered one last time. The fog settled, heavy, around the car, and the engine hummed again, steady but hollow. I kept driving. Eyes from the woods lingered in memory, and the echo of the radio followed me, soft, insistent, almost patient. The road stretched ahead, empty, shrouded in mist. Trees leaned close, their branches scraping shadows across the asphalt. The air smelled damp, earthy, and cold, pressing against my skin. I noticed it first in the corner of my eye, a red dot, pale and steady, hovering behind me. Tail light, perfectly matching my speed. I sped up. It followed. I slowed. It followed. The pulse of the fog seemed to thicken around the headlights, pressing against the glass, whispering against my ears. I tried to convince myself it was another car, another traveler lost in the fog, but the road was empty. No sound but the hum of the engine, the soft rustle of mist along the tires. The tail lights stayed, red, silent, patient. I blinked, and it mirrored me again. Every curve, every dip, it was there. Too close, too deliberate. The fog swallowed the horizon. The edges of the road dissolved into grey. I couldn't see where it began or where it ended. The mist seemed alive, curling, folding, reaching out. Toward the car, my hands tightened on the wheel. The leather felt sticky with cold sweat. Each pulse of the tail light reflected on the damp windshield. Every blink echoed through the cabin like a heartbeat not my own. I tried looking away, but my mind kept drifting back. The red glow hung in my vision, threading through the fog, pressing closer without moving. I felt it in the chest. A hollow weight, like the mist itself was waiting for me to notice. Every shiver of the air made the tail light throb, a slow, patient rhythm. I considered stopping, pulling off the road, letting it pass. But the idea felt wrong. The fog thickened, pressing against the tires, wrapping around the car like soft, invisible fingers. And then it vanished. No warning, no sound, just gone. The space behind me felt empty, yet somehow heavier, as though it had left a memory, a shadow that lingered in the air. The mist still clung to the trees, curled over the shoulder, swallowed the edges of the road. I drove on, alone, the hum of the engine a thin comfort. Every breath felt too loud, too close, and the red glow stayed in my mind. A warning without a form. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to. The memory of its patience, its exact, unyielding pace, followed me further into the fog, into the silence, into the night. The highway stretched endless and quiet. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, the faint scent of rain lingering in the air. I saw the exit suddenly, A rusted sign leaned at an impossible angle, letters worn away by time and weather. It wasn't on any map I had, and yet it called to me. The asphalt gave way beneath my tires. Soft, uneven, almost as if the ground itself wanted to hold me. I slowed, feeling the car sink slightly with each turn. The hum of the engine became heavier, thick and sluggish in the mist. The forest pressed close. Trees stood rigid, their branches tangled, casting long shadows that shivered in pale light. No birds, no wind, just the unnatural stillness of watching. I leaned forward. The tires crunched over gravel that felt deeper than it should. Every movement seemed to echo back at me. Soft, deliberate, like footsteps. Behind the car, I couldn't tell. A faint rustle. Soft, uneven. I froze. Footsteps. Someone or something following, matching the rhythm of my cautious pace. The mist thickened, curling around the headlights, pressing against the windshield like invisible hands. I could smell damp earth and decaying leaves, and the faint metallic tang of something forgotten. The trees seemed closer now, leaning in over the shoulder of the road, their dark silhouettes warped and impossible. The silence was alive, every breath heavy in the car, every heartbeat amplified by the hush. I tried to ignore the footsteps, told myself it was imagination. The echo of tires on gravel, the shifting branches above. But the steps persisted, soft, patient. Following the sign swayed in the windless air, rust flaking off in silent pieces. I tried to read it. Nothing, only shadows. The unknown pressed into me, curled into the seat and whispered along the mist. The road narrowed. The fog swallowed the horizon, stretching endlessly. I realized I didn't know where I was going. The forest seemed to fold in on itself, its silence heavier than any wall. The footsteps drew closer, not quick, not frantic, measured, almost curious, watching my every move from the shadows just beyond the pale light. I slowed again. Every movement of the car echoed through the mist, reverberating in the quiet, so that it felt like the forest itself inhaled with each turn. The tires sank a little more into the soft ground. The hum of the engine grew hollow, distant. I felt eyes everywhere, glimmering between tree trunks, hidden in folds of fog. I drove on, cautiously, slowly, the unknown stretching behind and ahead. The footsteps faded, but their memory lingered. A soft presence folded into the mist. I didn't look back. The exit disappeared behind a curtain of fog, and the forest swallowed the road hole. I kept driving. Alone, but certain the mist remembered every tire mark, every pause, every soft, deliberate step. The rest area lay empty under a pale wash of moonlight. The asphalt was damp, sticky with the memory of rain. A thin fog curled along the edges, licking the corners of the buildings. I parked and stepped out. The air smelled of cold metal, faint and sharp, clinging to the concrete in my skin. The hum of the distant highway was muted here, swallowed by stillness. I noticed the lights first, flickering in the bathrooms, pale, unsteady, casting shadows that twisted and leaned against the walls, corners too dark to measure. The doors were closed, but whispers drifted from within, soft, incoherent, urgent in the hush. They weren't loud enough to understand, but they pressed against. The ear curling into the chest, brushing the neck with invisible breath. I approached cautiously. The gravel crunched underfoot. Every step felt amplified, every inhale too sharp in the still air. The shadows shifted. Corners of walls, tiles, the faint outlines of sinks, moved just slightly, just enough to feel alive. No one there, yet every glance felt watched, every pause answered by silence that hummed like the lights. The smell of metal grew stronger, cold, unyielding, lingering in the air as if the rest area itself exhaled it. I pressed my hand against the wall. The tiles were chill, sticky with something damp I didn't want to name. The whispers moved again, closer, rubbing against the hum of the flickering lights. Not words, more like urges. They bent the air, curved the shadows, and stretched my own breath thin. I stepped back, but the shadows followed. Slowly, imperceptibly, curling around the edges of my vision. Every corner seemed alive now, every reflection in the glass pulsing with something unseen. I could hear it in the faint scrape of the vents, a low, soft rhythm under the buzz of the flickering bulbs, almost like footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling. Behind the walls, I wanted to leave, but the path to the car felt longer, the fog curling over the lot, pressing against the tires. The whispers lingered, folded into the hum of the night, echoing softly as I turned away. The lights flickered once more. A shadow stretched along the ground, then vanished. The silence that followed was so thick it weighed on the chest, yet the smell of metal remained, anchoring the memory of something waiting. I drove away slowly. The rest area shrank behind me in the mist, empty, still, but the whispers followed in memory, soft, insistent, impossible to leave behind. The highway stretched under a thin, grey sky. The asphalt was damp, clinging to the tires with a subtle stickiness. The air smelled of wet pine and cold stone, and the fog pressed against the edges of the headlights. I followed the curve. At first, it seemed normal, a bend in the road, but the road didn't end where it should. It curved again and again. The same stretch of asphalt looped back beneath me, like the highway had decided to fold in on itself. Signs appeared and vanished. One moment, a speed limit glowed in pale reflective paint. The next, gone, swallowed by fog. Branches leaned closer, twisting over the road, blocking more than light. I could feel them pressing against the edges of the car. The hum of the engine grew uneven, a low, trembling vibration that threaded through the tires, through the seat, into my chest. The fog shivered along the asphalt, curling in small, deliberate waves. I couldn't tell where the road began or where it ended. I slowed. The forest pressed tighter, dark shapes bending and stretching. Shadows merged with fog, then separated again, folding the highway into something impossible. Every turn brought the same scenery back, like a memory I had no recollection of making. I tried to look for markers, trees, rocks, a milepost, all vanished in the mist. The smell of damp earth filled the cabin, and a faint metallic tang lingered beneath it, sharp and uncanny. A soft rustle caught my attention, leaves brushing against themselves, branches bending without wind. Every sense screamed that the forest was aware, that the trees weren't just blocking the road, but guiding me in circles. The curve stretched before me again. I tried to drive faster. The road remained unchanged, The same bend, the same dip. The same eerie rhythm in the hum of the tires. The signs flickered in and out. One seemed to lean closer as I passed, then dissolved entirely, vanishing into the fog like it had never existed. The repetition pressed against the mind. Confusion, a slow tightening dread wrapped around my chest. I could feel the weight of isolation. No other car. No sound but the faint hum of the engine. No birds, no wind. Just the loops of asphalt, the folding forest, the impossible highway that refused to let me go. I blinked. The same bend appeared. The same trees leaned closer, shadowed branches stretching over the hood. The fog swirled differently now, curling round the tires, pushing inward, pulling me deeper into the loop. I tried to stop, but the car seemed reluctant to respond. The asphalt gave a faint, sticky resistance, as if the road itself wanted me to continue. The mist clung to the headlights, and the shadows lingered longer in the corners of vision. I drove on. The curve never ended. The forest, the fog, the leaning trees all became one oppressive shape. A tunnel that led only inward, folding over itself endlessly. I realized I was trapped. No markers, no signs, no escape. The road had swallowed its own path, and I was alone within it. Eventually, the hum settled into silence. The fog thickened, soft and suffocating. The headlights cut through grey nothingness, and the highway kept curving, quiet, patient, unbroken. I kept driving, every bend a reminder, every shadow a presence, and the loop folded inward around me forever. The night hung heavy. Fog rolled along the edges of the highway, clinging to the trees, curling over the asphalt. The air was damp, cold, and smelled faintly of pine and wet soil. I noticed them first in the corner of my eye. Small glimmers, glowing red like distant embers. They flickered between the treetops and the roadside, watching, patient, deliberate. I blinked, and they moved, synchronized, every pair shifting together, as if alive with intent. The engine hummed. Beneath my hands, steady but suddenly fragile in the thick air. The tires whispered against wet asphalt. Every breath I drew felt too loud, echoing in the fog, like it belonged to someone else. The eyes followed every curve, leaning from shadows, balanced on branches, peering from behind dark trunks. Some seemed close, hovering just at the edge of headlights. Others melted into the grey, only to appear again in a new place. The forest was alive in a way I couldn't measure. Leaves rustled softly, brushing against themselves. Branches shifted without wind, curling along the path as though guiding me deeper. I could feel the fog pressing against the glass, soft, moist, and deliberate. The glow intensified. Pairs of eyes multiplied in the mist, catching reflections from the wet asphalt. I tried to look away, tried to tell myself it was imagination, but the rhythm was too precise, too intentional. I slowed. The movement of the eyes matched my pace, hovering just beyond reach, sliding across the periphery. I felt the presence in my chest, pressing into ribs and shoulders, a weight that was not mine alone. The fog thickened. It swallowed the headlights, curled around the tires, folded the edges of the road into darkness. The eyes lingered a moment longer, then vanished. Silence followed. Heavy, dense, alive in the absence of sound. The night seemed to inhale and hold its breath. I could still feel the memory of watching, a pulse threaded through the fog, as if something had paused, waiting. I drove on, slowly, cautiously. The road stretched endlessly. Every shadow seemed to shift in memory of those eyes. Leaves whispered behind the mist. Branches bent closer, leaning toward the car, without wind, without sound. The glow returned briefly. A single pair, then gone again, leaving the fog heavier, more intimate. Pressing against every sense I had, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The memory of watching stayed in the chest, a warmth and a cold at the same time, folded into my breath. Threaded into the hum of the engine. The fog swallowed the forest ahead. The eyes did not return. Only the silence remained, thick, patient, alive in the absence of anything else. I kept driving. Every curve of the road stretched longer. Every shadow seemed to linger just a second too long. And the memory of those eyes, glowing, deliberate, impossible, followed me through the mist. The highway narrowed under the low, grey sky. Fog clung to the edges, soft and wet, pressing against the asphalt in the car. The air smelled of damp, metal and earth, heavy with the faint tints of rust. I saw it before I could stop. A massive truck blocking the road, its paint dulled by years of weather, tires half sunk in the soft shoulder. It seemed abandoned. The engine hummed, low, constant, a soft vibration that threaded into the ground. I stepped out. The gravel shifted. Underfoot, small stones crunching, almost loud in the heavy silence. I circled the cab. Windows fogged, streaked with rain. The hum persisted, steady, unyielding. No driver, no movement inside. Just the soft, mechanical pulse of life. I leaned closer. The smell of oil and metal thickened, mixing with the damp fog. And then, a shadow. Moving behind the windshield, quick, deliberate, but never leaving a form. I froze. My breath curled in the cold air. The hum in the engine seemed louder now, as if aware, as if it pulsed in tandem with the shadow. I looked through the side window. Empty cab. Seat, steering wheel, controls nothing. Yet the shadow lingered, sliding along the glass, folding in two. The corners, alive without substance. The fog pressed against the truck, curling over the tires, soft fingers of grey brushing the hood. I could hear my pulse in the quiet, a rhythm too loud, too insistent. I stepped back. The shadow retreated, but the hum remained, low and patient, threading through the mist, through the chill, through me. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light. Reflection, fog, imagination. But every instinct, the rusted metal, the damp air, the vibration beneath my feet, told me otherwise. The truck's cab seemed to breathe, windows fogging and clearing as if inhaling. Every time I shifted my gaze, the shadow edged closer to perception. Not a body, not a face, just presence. I stepped back further. Gravel crunched under careful feet. The engine hummed the same. The fog thickened around the tires, curling higher, swallowing the lower frame. I felt eyes in the mist. Beyond the truck, between the trees, watching, waiting. The shadow and the forest intertwined, threads of unease tying the night together. I didn't touch the door, didn't move closer. I couldn't. The truck's presence held me in place. Heavy and patient, anchored in fog and cold metal. Eventually, I stepped back to the car. The hum lingered in memory. The shadow didn't vanish completely. It folded into the fog, soft, deliberate, impossible to leave behind. I drove on. Every tire crunch echoed against the still night. The highway stretched pale and empty. The truck remained in memory, a pulse of unease threaded through the fog. Watching, patient, alive in absence. Rain pelted the windshield, soft, relentless, smearing the world into grey streaks. The wipers moved lazily, never fully clearing the view. The air smelled of wet asphalt and cold metal, clinging to the car like a damp blanket. I glanced in the rearview mirror. At first, just reflections of the road behind me. But then, a shape. Someone sitting in the back seat. I blinked. Gone. Only the empty headdress stared back. I told myself it was a trick of the rain, light bouncing across glass. I kept driving. The hum of the engine steady, but every vibration felt sharper, shaking through the seat into my chest. I looked again. There, a shadowed figure. Silent, still, its eyes impossible to read in the dim light. The rain streaked across the mirror, distorting the face, stretching features into something unreal. I tried to shake it off. The windshield blurred the outside world, fog curling around the edges, and the wipers traced a slow rhythm against the glass. But the feeling persisted. Breath against the neck, weight pressing down through the seat. I looked again. Empty, nothing. The back seat was ordinary, the leather damp from my touch. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on old steel. Every time I blinked, the shape appeared, then vanished. Soft, patient, like the car itself was breathing, folding the presence into the mist and rain. I slowed. The headlights cut thin lines through the sheets of grey, illuminating wet leaves along the roadside. The hum of the tires on asphalt sounded louder, echoing in the confined space of the cabin, and the figure lingered just beyond the edge of certainty, folding into the reflection again and again. I pressed my palm against the wheel, cold, slightly damp. The air inside the car thickened, weighty, unyielding. I could feel every heartbeat, every inhale drawn too sharply, matching the rhythm of the figure in the mirror. I didn't look for a reason. There wasn't one. The rain distorted everything. Yet the back seat carried the same impossible certainty. Someone or something was there, watching, patient. Eventually, I forced my gaze forward. The mirror reflected only the wet road behind, empty and grey. But the memory of those eyes lingered, soft and persistent, folded into the hum of the engine, the smell of rain, the cold that pressed against the skin. I drove on, slowly, carefully. Every curve stretched longer, every shadow lingered just a fraction too long. The rain continued its steady rhythm, and the reflection in the mirror never truly left my mind. The highway stretched pale under a muted sky. Fog curled along the edges of the asphalt, pressing soft and damp against the tires. The air smelled faintly of rain and oil, cold and quiet, wrapping around the car. A light appeared ahead, soft, golden, glowing in the fog. A toll booth, alone, unattended. Its small window illuminated the mist, like a candle in a cavern of grey. I slowed. The tires whispered against the asphalt. Every breath seemed to linger longer than usual, tasting damp metal and wet leaves. I reached for the door handle. The booth seemed closer now, its glow pulling me forward. And then it was gone. The light vanished. The structure itself dissolved into the fog, leaving nothing but empty road. A soft voice followed. My name, whispered, careful, impossible. It didn't startle me. It pressed against the mind, curling into the chest with quiet insistence. I stopped. The fog folded around the car, dense, thick, almost tactile. The hum of the engine seemed distant, like the night itself was holding its breath. I looked for the booth. Nothing. Empty asphalt stretched forward, yet the glow lingered in memory, soft and patient, folded into the mist. I stepped out. The gravel shifted beneath my feet, cold and damp. I could feel the fog brushing against my skin, curling along the collar of my jacket, pressing softly like unseen hands. The voice came again. A whisper that curled along the fog, folded into the rustling leaves, threaded through the chill in the air. I strained to see. Branches leaned closer, casting long, impossible shadows. The road itself seemed to stretch, folding inward on itself. Folding around the space where the booth had been, the light flickered briefly in the distance. Not a structure, just a glow, hovering between reality and something else. It pulsed, patient, watching. Every blink of my eyes brought it closer, then farther, like a memory trying to form. I stepped back into the car. The tires whispered against the asphalt. The voice softened, patient, threaded into every breath, every heartbeat, and the fog pressed closer, thick and waiting. I drove on. The booth never returned. The glow lingered only in memory, folded into the mist and shadows, a presence quiet, impossible, watching, waiting, patient. Fog pressed thick along the highway. The asphalt was slick, cold, and dark. The air smelled damp, sharp with the scents of wet leaves, and the hum of the engine felt heavy beneath my hands. Shadows moved first at the edges of vision. Long, thin shapes folding through the fog, sliding against the lanes as if the mist itself carried them. I blinked. They mirrored my movements, every swerve, every adjustment. The headlights cut pale streaks across the road. The shadows shifted, faster than the light. Soft rustling followed them, brushing along the fog, curling into the edges of the car. I could feel it, something pressing, weight I couldn't see, pushing against the tires, against the roof, against my chest. I slowed. The asphalt whispered beneath the tires, tiny vibrations threading through my feet. The shadows did the same, a rhythm that mimicked the hum of the engine. Each turn I took, they followed perfectly. Each correction in the wheel reflected by some silent, unseen twin. The fog thickened. Branches leaned closer, stretching over the road, casting impossible angles of shadow. The air grew cold, damp, metallic. Every breath tasted heavy, pressed into the lungs. I tried to focus forward. The road looked normal, endless and pale, but the peripheral world moved differently. Shadows crossing, curling, sliding against the fog, not random, deliberate, mimicking. The weight increased. It pressed against the roof of the car, against the seat, against the steering wheel. Every movement felt sluggish, like driving underwater. The engine hummed, low and tense, threading through the fog, through the shadows, through me. I blinked again. A shadow darted across the lane ahead. Then another. They moved in pairs, in unison, folding into each other, folding into the mist. The hum of tires against asphalt grew louder in my ears. The fog coiled around the wheels, curling up the sides of the car, softly, almost tenderly, pressing the shape of shadows into every surface. I tried to drive faster. The shadows followed perfectly. Every curve, every shift, mirrored. Every acceleration met with quiet reflection. The air hummed with tension. Rustling, brushing, unseen movement. I realized I was not alone. Not in a form I could see, but a presence. Heavy, patient, insistent. Threaded through the fog, through the shadows, through every heartbeat. I slowed again. The mist swallowed the road ahead. The shadows lingered at the edges of perception. The weight pressed just slightly less, but never left. Every glance in the mirrors caught darkness folding in, mimicking the car's shape, folding over the fog. I kept driving, slow, careful, deliberate. The shadows never left. They followed, patient, impossible, moving against the fog, folding into the night. And the weight invisible, insistent remained. The night was thick and still. Fog rolled across the highway, folding over asphalt and shoulder alike. The air was damp, cold, carrying the faint scent of wet pine and earth. Every inhale tasted of metal and mist. I glanced in the rearview mirror. 2 points of light reflected back at me, bright, unblinking, impossible. They hovered in the darkness. Tracing my movement with quiet patience, I checked the back seat. Empty, leather damp under my hand. Nothing to suggest life had been there. Yet the lights persisted, reflecting in the glass as if the night itself had eyes. The engine hummed beneath my fingers. Steady, normal, but I felt it differently. A vibration threading through the seat, pressing lightly against my chest. Every shadow seemed sharper, folded along the edges of the fog. I blinked. The lights stayed. They mirrored my movements. A shift in the wheel, a breath, a turn of the head, always following, always watching. The road stretched pale beneath the headlights. Mist curled along the shoulder, soft and tactile. Rustling leaves brushed the car, whispering in the spaces between the hum and the fog. The lights in the mirror pulsed faintly, timed to some rhythm I could not name. I tried to convince myself it was reflection, headlights from a distant car, the glass catching light just so. But there was no road behind me, no other vehicle, only the still night and those unblinking points of light. I slowed. The tires whispered over wet asphalt. Every adjustment in speed met with the same silent mimic in the mirror. The lights remained patient, deliberate, folded into the fog that pressed against the windows. I could feel the night around the car, dense, heavy, watching. Breath pressed against my collar, the chill of fog brushing my face. The mirror reflected. Only the lights, bright and impossible, and the emptiness of the back seat. I blinked again. The points of light shifted slightly, but never left. Hovering, observing, silent. I could hear nothing beyond the hum of the engine, yet the presence pressed against me, threaded into every sense. I tried to look away, forward to the road. The lights lingered at the edge of vision, folded into the periphery. They seemed patient, waiting, not aggressive, just certain, knowing. The mist thickened. Branches leaned close, casting long shadows across the road. The lights followed each bend, each dip, always perfectly aligned. The isolation of the night grew heavier, folding into the car, pressing against the doors and windows. I drove on slowly. Every blink revealed the same reflection, the same impossible eyes. The back seat remained empty. The fog wrapped tighter. The silence deepened, and the lights never left. Fog clung to the highway, dense and cold. The asphalt stretched pale and slick beneath the tires. The air smelled of wet concrete and pine, pressing damp and heavy against the skin. Every breath tasted of mist and something metallic. I turned a familiar curve. The guardrail should have been there. Solid, reassuring. A line against the dark. But it wasn't. Nothing. Only fog. The edge of the road disappeared into grey. I drove where solid ground should have been. The tires hummed against. Nothing. A vibration threaded up through the steering wheel. Soft, steady, but wrong. The headlights cut thin lines through the mist. They reflected off nothing, showing only the dark folds of fog and the empty space where the guardrail should have been. I slowed. Every breath seemed louder, sharper. The hum of the tires echoed strangely, as if rolling over air instead of asphalt. The fog pressed closer, curling along the car, whispering through the gaps in the doors. I glanced to the edge. Mist shifted like liquid, folding over nothing. The world felt suspended, weightless. The familiar line of safety had vanished, and the road was no longer certain. I pressed my hands to the wheel, cold metal against damp skin. The vibration continued, subtle but insistent, threading through the seat, through my chest, through every breath. The fog thickened further. Shadows leaned along the edges of perception, impossible angles cast by nothing. Every blink revealed empty space, folding beneath the car, folding around the tires, as if the world had forgotten the guardrail existed. I tried to steady myself. The headlights carved lines into the mist, but the light dissolved into grey, swallowing every edge, every line of certainty. The road hummed beneath me, tires pressed against nothing. Each meter stretched longer than it should, an invisible weight pressing forward. I held my breath. The fog wrapped closer, cold, damp, metallic, rustling along the edges, curling into the car, threaded into the hum of the tires. The line between road and void blurred. Every second stretched, elongated, uncertain. I kept driving, slow, careful, measured. The guardrail never returned. The fog swallowed it entirely, folding the world into mist and silence. The hum under the tires remained, soft, insistent, impossible. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The void followed me, patient, waiting. And the road, the fog, the absence of solid ground, stretched on, endless, silent and alone. The fog. lay thick across the highway, dense and cold, curling over asphalt and shoulder alike. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a hint of rusted metal. Breath pressed against the collar, chilled and heavy. I came upon a crossroads. No signs marked the intersection. The lines of the road vanished into the fog, folded and swallowed by grey. Every path stretched pale, empty, uncertain. The mist moved strangely here, swirling in unnatural patterns, like it had a mind of its own. It curled along the pavement, curling around the car, brushing against the tires, soft, insistent, alive. I slowed. The tires hummed over wet asphalt. The hum sounded hollow, stretched. Every shift of the wheel echoed through the mist. I glanced down each road. Something blocked my view. Shadows hung dense at the edges, folded into the fog like dark cloth. I could feel the isolation pressing in. The silence wasn't empty. It pressed against the doors, threaded along the glass, weighed down the hum of the engine. The air tasted faintly metallic. I tried to choose a path. Each road seemed endless, folding forward, curving impossibly, swallowing the light. The fog pulsed in time with my heartbeat, slow, deliberate, patient. Every blink revealed the same. Uncertainty, the same impossible shadows. The tires whispered along the pavement. Every movement carried weight, though nothing shifted around me. The intersection seemed to stretch, expanding, folding, pressing into the corners of the fog. I took a step on the accelerator. The car moved forward, but the roads resisted, folded back, as if the fog itself was waiting, guarding what lay beyond. Shadows leaned closer, impossible angles, folding into the mist. The silence deepened. Breath tasted colder, sharper. Rustling curled along the edges of the car, soft, deliberate, insistent. The hum of the engine vibrated through the seat, threaded. Into the fog, threaded into me. I tried to look past the darkness. Nothing moved. Nothing waited. Yet the view remained blocked. The fog thickened with every blink, folding the intersection, folding the roads, folding reality around the edges. I drove slowly. The crossroads stretched endlessly, the fog curling like a living thing. Shadows lingered at the periphery of perception. The silence pressed closer, and the isolation wrapped the car like a soft, damp blanket. I didn't try to force a choice. I drove forward, carefully, letting the hum of the tires guide me. The fog remained, thick and patient, folding the intersection, folding the shadows, folding the night dot, and the roads empty, impossible, silent, waited. The fog lay heavy across the clearing, folding over the road that wasn't really there. The air was damp and cold, tinged with pine and wet earth. Every inhale carried the weight of silence. I saw him then, a figure in a reflector vest, standing perfectly still, arms raised, directing traffic. But there was no road, no lane lines, no other vehicle, only the fog stretching in every direction. Slowed the car, tires whispering against asphalt that felt uncertain. The hum beneath me vibrated in the seat, threaded into my chest, pressing lightly with a weight I couldn't name. The man's movements were deliberate, fluid in the mist, folding into the grey. Every shift of his arm carried certainty, though nothing moved to follow. It was almost polite, almost human. I blinked. When my eyes opened again, he was gone. The fog swallowed him, folding the air where he had stood, leaving only emptiness. The hum of the forest filled the space, soft, steady, insistent. I pressed my hands to the wheel. Cold leather, damp under my fingers. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of light, a reflection in the mist, but the weight of the scene lingered. The forest hummed, trees leaning closer, shadowed and still. I looked around. The car seemed smaller, swallowed by fog that pressed. Against the glass, the ground smelled of wet pine and soil. Every breath tasted of damp metal. I moved forward slowly. The space where the man had stood remained empty, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Soft, persistent, threaded into the hum of the tires, folded into the fog. The reflective S might have been bright, but the grey consumed it instantly. The figure had been real. I could feel the absence of him, the way the air seemed hollowed. The way the forest's hum had shifted from stillness to something alive. I blinked again, careful, hesitant. No movement, no figure. The road ahead stretched pale and empty, but I could feel him in the space behind me, somewhere folded into the mist. I drove slowly. Every foot of asphalt hummed beneath the tires. Branches brushed the windows, folding. Shadows into the fog. The forest breathed around me, soft, steady, waiting. And I knew he wasn't gone. Not completely, just watching from some corner of the mist, where the road didn't exist, where the forest hummed in his absence. The fog clung to the edges of the lane, thick, cold, curling along the asphalt. The air smelled of damp pine and wet metal. Every inhale pressed heavy against my chest. Then I saw them. Headlights, far ahead, blinking, perfectly in time with my heartbeat. Slow, fast, irregular, and yet always matching. I swerved slightly. The lights adjusted, kept pace. The tires whispered against wet asphalt, a soft hum beneath the car. The fog brushed the windows, cold, damp, pressing. I blinked. Every flash of light-carved shadows in the mist, folding along the road like hands reaching. Every beat of my heart echoed in the headlights, like a mirrored pulse, unsettling, deliberate. The road narrowed. The fog thickened, curling around the edges. The smell of wet asphalt and earth grew stronger, damp, heavy, metallic. Every breath felt visible, fog curling from my mouth, folding into the larger mist. I tried to focus ahead. The blinking continued, perfect and steady. I adjusted. The wheel. The lights mirrored me. Every swerve, every hesitation, they followed precisely, patiently. A shadow shifted in the periphery, along the foggy edges, leaning closer, folding into the beam of light. I could feel it pressing against the car, soft, invisible, insistent. The tires hummed, higher pitch now, vibrating through the seat, through my hands, threading into my chest. The fog wrapped the road tighter, every blink of the headlights folding the lane into uncertainty. I slowed, trying to let them pass. They didn't, kept pace. The pulse of the lights in my heart became a single rhythm, slow and deliberate, wrapping. The car, wrapping the fog, wrapping me. The mist thickened still further. Shadows hung along the edges, impossible angles leaning into the lane. I could feel them watching, their presence folded into the blinking, the hum, the damp, heavy air. I drove on, slowly, carefully, letting the rhythm guide me. The headlights never faltered, the fog never lifted. The road remained uncertain, and through it all, the blinking continued, synchronized with my pulse, patient, deliberate, wrapping the night around me, alone, silent, and unbroken. The road stretched ahead, fog curling along the edges like smoke from a distant fire. The air was cold, damp, heavy with the smell of wet leaves and pine. I noticed the first mile marker. It should have read 23. Instead, it read 22. Blinked, almost, in the pale light, as if counting backward. I frowned. Blinked. Again, the next marker shifted to 21. Then 20. They weren't supposed to move. They weren't supposed to count down. The trees leaned closer, bending their dark limbs toward the road. Shadows stretched across the asphalt, rustling softly as if breathing. I could feel their weight pressing in, a gentle insistence against the car. I adjusted the wheel. The tires hummed against wet asphalt, soft vibrations threading into my hands. Every marker ahead continued the countdown, each number closer, folding time into something unnatural. The fog thickened. It coiled around the trees, swallowing the distance ahead. I could hear it, almost a subtle rustling along the branches, as if the forest itself murmured warnings. I tried to look away. The road should have felt familiar. It didn't. Everything twisted slightly. Even the ground beneath the tires seemed uncertain. The markers counted down, pale, unyielding, relentless. Shadows moved in tandem with the leaning trees. I could feel the pull of something unseen, pressing softly, insistently, against the car and my chest. Every mile closer was a heartbeat. Every heartbeat folded into the fog. I blinked again. The next marker read 19. The air smelled sharper. Now, metallic and wet, threading into my breath. The car hummed beneath me, its vibrations syncing with the pulse of the road. The trees seemed alive, arching their limbs more insistently, folding shadows across the asphalt, casting shapes that shifted as I moved. Every glance ahead made the countdown tick faster, a rhythm of dread I could not escape. I slowed, letting the tires hum softly over the wet road. The fog clung closer, folding around the markers, around the leaning trees, around me. I tried to imagine the road as normal, markers standing still, trees upright. But the forest had a different will. The numbers shifted, the shadows leaned, and I felt the pull of the restless mile markers, guiding me forward, deeper into uncertainty, alone. The night pressed close. Fog rolled low over the asphalt, hanging in soft veils across the headlights. I passed the guardrail. Rusting metal hummed faintly, a vibration threading through the car, a resonance that settled into my chest. The hum became a whisper, soft, almost too soft to hear. Secrets I had never spoken slipped through the fog, curling around the tires, brushing against my skin like a hesitant breath. I blinked. The guardrail pulsed, shadows stretching and contracting along its length. Each pulse felt deliberate, measured. To the rhythm of my own heart, I slowed. The metal shivered under the dim light, rust flakes catching the pale glow, like tiny sparks of memory scattered along the roadside. The whispers grew clearer, a chorus from nowhere, from inside me, from the mist itself. Names, regrets, small confessions I had buried floated up and hovered, swirling in the cool, damp air. I gripped the wheel tighter. The fog thickened, clinging to the mirrors, folding the edges of the world in on itself. The forest pressed close, branches scraping softly against the glass, a rhythmic accompaniment to the whispered truths. I could see shadows moving against the fog, pulsing in time with the guardrail's hum, stretching like fingers toward the road. Toward me, they didn't step. They leaned, swayed, as if the night itself were breathing. A chill ran through my hands. I could taste the cold metal on my tongue, smell the wet rust and decaying leaves. The whispers tangled with it, soft echoes repeating, dredging memories I had tried to hide. I tried to keep driving. The hum followed. The shadows followed. Even when I glanced away, the whispers lingered, sliding through the fog, folding around. The car pressing into the spaces behind my eyes, the guardrail and a door, so I thought. The echoes stretched on, trailing into the darkness like a river of sighs. I felt the weight of it, the subtle insistence, the knowing that I could never leave it behind. I drove on, fog swallowing the road, the rusting metal fading from sight. But the whispers lingered, soft and intimate, folded into the hum of the night, a shadow pressing against the silence. The road stretched forward, alone and uncertain, and in the quiet between breaths, I heard my own secrets answered with silence. That was heavier than the fog. The highway rose before me. Curves that should have ended spiraled upward, impossibly smooth. Fog hugged the edges of the road, damp against the windshield, cold against my hands. Overpasses appeared, glimmering pale in the dim light, then vanished the moment I looked closer. The hum of tires on asphalt shifted strangely, like the car floated just above the road. I leaned forward. Every turn seemed familiar, yet nothing was the same. The air smelled of wet concrete, metal, and something older, something lingering in the mist. The guardrails bent in impossible angles. Shadows pooled beneath the overpasses, reaching across the lane as if the darkness itself had weight. I felt it pressing down, a soft, invisible hand against the roof, against my chest. The road looped again. Signs blinked in and out, numbers and arrows melting into fog and silence. The hum grew deeper, vibrating under my seat, echoing in my ribs. I tried to follow the lane, but the curves circled back, curling around themselves like a spiral staircase. The overpasses stacked above, then below, each one catching pale light that seemed not to exist. Breath caught in my throat. The wind whispered through the gaps, rustling leaves high in the misted treetops. The car felt suspended, treading through a maze made of air, steel, and fog. I reached for the wheel. It felt heavier than before, then lighter, then weightless. The horizon disappeared, folded into itself, folded into the curve, folded into silence. I thought I saw another car light, far above, blinking in impossible patterns. Then it vanished, as though the night swallowed it whole. The overpasses twisted higher. I could smell wet asphalt, metal, and something faintly burned, as if the road itself exhaled smoke. My tires hummed in a rhythm I couldn't match, a cadence dictated by the loop, by the spiral. Shadows pooled under the arches. They leaned inward, pressing toward the car, stretching with intent, mimicking the curve of the highway. I tried to leave. The road spiraled beneath me, above me, around me. Every exit I remembered was swallowed by fog, erased before my eyes. Silence became heavy. No engine, no tires, no hum, just the fog and the soft shifting of shadows around the looping overpasses. I was suspended, alone in a maze that had no beginning, no end, no center. I exhaled slowly. The mist clung to the glass. The hum softened to a breath, a rhythm I felt in my chest. The road stretched endlessly, and I followed, half in awe, half in fear, trapped in the spiral, and yet moving forward. The fog sat low, thick against the road. It muffled the hum of my tires, the breath of the engine, and the rhythm of my own heartbeat. A car appeared behind me. Red lights glowed faintly through the mist, close enough that I could feel its presence pressing in my chest. Too close, tailgating. Relentless, matching every subtle movement of my steering. I glanced in the mirror. The road behind was empty. No tire tracks, no headlights, just fog curling into shadows that wrapped around the lane. I exhaled slowly. The tail light reappeared. Soft and steady, yet impossible. It followed as though glued to me, but every time I checked, the road was empty. My hands gripped the wheel. The leather felt cold, damp. The mist seeped under the door, into the vents, and it carried a scent of wet asphalt and metal sharp. Tangy, alive. The car drew closer. I felt it in my bones, a quiet weight pressing downward like the fog itself had grown heavy, heavy with intent. I blinked. It vanished, then flickered back in the mirror, exactly where it had been. Red lights. Pulsing in sync with my pulse. Shadows stretched across the fog. They leaned inward, arching toward the lane, as though trying to trap me between them and the phantom tailgate. I slowed, cautiously, but it slowed too. Every nudge of the wheel was mirrored by lights behind me, as if the car breathed with me, as if it knew the path my hands would take before I even thought it. The mist thickened further. Trees dissolved into grey shapes, branches reaching like fingers over the edges of the lane. The air smelled of wet leaves, old wood, and something metallic that clung to my clothes. I blinked again. Red light vanished, swallowed by the fog. Silence. Settled. A hum rose faintly under the tires, soft as a whisper in the cabin, and I felt a breath brush the back of my neck, but no one was there. Then it reappeared. Red eyes behind glass, silent and unwavering. I couldn't move, couldn't escape, could only follow the looping road through a haze that seemed to bend around me, carrying the phantom with it. The lane curled, invisible under the fog. Shadows shifted at the edges, leaning in and stretching, dancing just outside the light. Every turn I took, every gentle nudge of the wheel, was mirrored by the tailgate, closer than it had any right to be. Breath caught in my throat. The engine hummed, and my pulse became the rhythm of the red lights, pounding through the mist, through the asphalt, through the soft, reaching shadows. I exhaled slowly. The red light lingered in the mirror, then receded into nothingness. The fog swallowed it whole. Silence settled like dust, heavy, trembling, and I drove forward, alone, with the memory of eyes that followed without form, without tracks, without mercy. The fog clung to the asphalt, thick and silent. Pale light from the headlights barely touched the edges of the trees. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I saw the first sign ahead. Its metal surface split, fine lines running. Across it like tiny veins. A soft hum rose from the cracks. Letters began to shift. A message formed, trembling in the dim light. Turn left. Now. I blinked. The mist pressed closer, and the road curved exactly where it had said. My hands tightened on the wheel. A cold sweat traced down my neck. The next sign cracked in. The same way, words emerged slowly, almost breathing. Brake. Here. The tires groaned over the slick asphalt. I obeyed without thinking, and the road whispered under the hum of the engine. I glanced in the mirror. The fog moved differently. Now, folding around shapes that weren't there before. Shadows pooled at the roadside, leaning, reaching toward the lane. I smelled wet leaves and something metallic, like rusted iron pressed against skin. Another sign appeared. Cracks spidered across it, revealing letters that seemed alive. Don't look back. I wanted to obey, but my eyes flicked to the mirror. Anyway, nothing. Yet the feeling lingered, a weight on my chest. The air felt thicker, colder, as if the fog itself was holding its breath. The messages continued, predicting each subtle movement. Swerve right, slow, then accelerate. Every command matched my instinctive reactions. I couldn't tell if I was driving or being driven. Branches scraped against the car's sides. The rough bark and wet leaves whispered with each pass. The ground beneath the tires hummed softly, almost vibrating against the soles of my feet. I tried to focus on the road ahead. The signs became harder to read. Cracks widened, letters bending and twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. The words seemed to float just beyond comprehension, mocking, teasing, predicting. I felt a presence in the passenger seat, empty, yet the weight of unseen eyes pressed against me. A faint breath brushed my neck. I couldn't tell if it was my own. Another sign appeared larger, closer, impossible. Its message was a single word: stop. I slowed, heart pounding, mind trembling under the fog's gentle, suffocating weight. The road curved ahead. I obeyed, but the sign cracked further, revealing a second line: you always do. A chill ran through my spine. The letters seemed to echo inside my head, synchronizing with my pulse, my breath, my fear. The fog thickened. Beyond the edges of vision, branches arched over the lane, scraping, whispering. I felt the signs shift in place, though the road beneath me hadn't moved. Reality felt thin, dissolving, like I was slipping between something known and unknown. I exhaled slowly. The last sign appeared, split down the middle. Letters trembled and faded, then disappeared into the mist. Silence settled heavy around the car, a soft, shivering quiet. I drove on. The fog swallowed the cracked signs. The messages lingered in my mind. Every turn, every shift of the wheel felt guided by a hand I could not see. The road stretched ahead, pale and empty. I was alone. Or maybe I never had been. The night was thick with damp air. Fog pressed against the windshield, curling like smoke. Every breath I took smelled of wet earth and something faintly metallic. The headlights cut pale shapes into the mist. They vanished as quickly as they appeared. The road felt hollow beneath the tires. Each rotation seemed to crunch over invisible gravel. I felt it first at the corners of my vision. Shadows twisting, folding into the fog. Soft movements that weren't. My own eyes, maybe, or nothing at all. The fog shifted around the car. It rose in curling tendrils, brushing the windows. Whispers rode the hum of the engine. Not words I could understand, but tones that pressed against my chest. I gripped the wheel tighter. The tires hummed over a ground I could not see. A sense of weightless displacement settled into my bones. I felt watched from every angle. Every direction held a presence I could not name. Trees leaned closer at the roadside. Branches scraped the roof. The smell of damp bark filled my nostrils. A static hum vibrated through the air. I wanted to move faster. The fog slowed me instead, curling thicker around the hood. Shapes formed in the mist. Sometimes animal, sometimes human, sometimes nothing. They shifted with the turn of the wheel. I could never catch them fully. Each blink of the eyes revealed something new. A whisper rose, soft, impossibly close. It wrapped around my thoughts. I could feel the fog press against my neck. Each inhale tasted of rain and rust. The road twisted ahead. Tires hummed against the invisible ground. Every movement I made seemed mirrored by the fog. I reached for the brakes. The fog pulled away, curling back like the exhale of some unseen creature. Shadows stretched longer, thinner, bending toward the car like they might touch it. The air vibrated with soft static. I smelled wet moss and something iron-like, as though the fog had soaked in memory. I tried to keep my eyes on the headlights. The fog bent them, splitting light into fractals. Movement in the corners persisted. Soft footsteps echoing on ground that shouldn't exist. A cold weight pressed from behind the seat. Invisible hands, or just the fog, breathing along with me. My pulse rattled in my ears. The whispers returned. They wrapped around the hum of the engine. I couldn't follow them, couldn't understand, could only feel their intent. The fog thinned slightly ahead. Road edges appeared, pale and soft in the headlights. I moved forward cautiously. The whispers receded. The weight lifted slightly, but the fog lingered. Around the mirrors, along the roof, soft shapes curling, breathing, waiting, watching me drive, alone, into the uncertain night. The night was thick, air damp with fog. Headlights struggled against the mist. A faint glow appeared ahead. The exit sign shimmered pale and yellow. Edges rusted, light trembling. It seemed alive. I slowed, tires humming over uneven asphalt. The road beyond was overgrown. Grass brushed. The undercarriage. Leaves crunched softly under the tires. The forest leaned close. Branches reached toward the asphalt. Their shadows stretched long, swaying in the dim glow. Something moved just beyond the tree line. A shape, or just the mist twisting. I felt a pull, subtle, insistent. A presence waiting among the pines. Cold breath on my neck, though no one was there. The hum of the engine sounded louder here. Static seemed to fill the air. Rustling leaves whispered secrets I almost understood. The scent of wet soil and pine sap thickened. I glanced back at the highway. Fog stretched into infinity. The road behind was silent, endless. The glow of the exit felt like a promise. I pressed forward slowly. Branches scratched the roof, brushing the windows. The asphalt faded under the weeds. My tires hummed over the softness of earth. Something beckoned from the trees. A shadow, shifting, pale and thin. It stayed just beyond the fog, just beyond reach. I could almost hear its breath. The forest seemed alive. The exit sign's light flickered, casting trembling shapes on the overgrowth. Every leaf, every twig seemed to lean closer. I hesitated. The road invited, but I felt weight behind me. A sense of what I had left behind, or what I might never escape. Footsteps, soft, almost in rhythm with my own. No echo, no form, just the feeling of being followed. The trees whispered encouragement or warning. The light of the exit shimmered again, soft, almost tender. I could feel the fog curling around the car, cold fingers brushing the door, tracing the edges. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stay. The road behind was familiar, though it led nowhere certain. The exit waited, silent, overgrown, almost inviting. I could smell wet moss and the decay of old leaves. The wind shifted, carrying a faint, wordless call. My hands gripped the wheel. The tires hummed over the earth, over what should have been solid. The forest held its breath. Shadows curled and receded, just enough to let me see. I moved forward. Slowly. The glow brightened slightly, then faded again. Branches brushed against the windows, then fell silent. A final glance behind. The fog swallowed the highway. The world I knew disappeared into mist. Only the last exit remained. I breathed in the cold, damp night. The trees leaned one last time, almost as if they were saying goodbye. The road invited, and I let it take me. The night pressed close. Fog rolled thick across the highway, hiding. The trees. Headlights glinted off wet asphalt. I saw it then. A cabin, dilapidated, leaning like it carried secrets. The wood was pale under the faint moonlight. Shingles sagged. Windows stared back empty and dark. The wind whispered through the branches. Leaves rustled. A faint hum seemed to come from the cabin itself. The door moved. A slow creak. It opened just enough. I didn't touch it. I didn't push. Yet it was inviting, like a hand in the mist. The air shifted around me. Fog thickened outside, curling against the walls. It pressed close to the car, soft, damp and cold. The smell of wet pine and decay mixed with something else. Something metallic, sharp, almost burned. I stepped forward. Boots scuffed on loose. Gravel. The creak of the porch echoed into the night. Each step felt heavier than the last. The door yawned wider. Inside, shadows pooled in corners. Pale light trickled from a cracked window. The air smelled old, like dust and wood left to rot. I couldn't stop. Something drew me in. A subtle pull, a whisper, almost too soft to hear. It felt alive, breathing along with me. The floorboards groaned under my weight, rustling behind walls, or in my mind. I couldn't tell. A cold draft curled around my ankles. The cabin seemed larger inside than it should. Shadows stretched upward, across walls and ceiling. I thought I saw movement. Just movement. Nothing solid, nothing real. The fog outside churned against the glass. It leaned in like the world was closing, folding in on itself. A faint hum vibrated through the floorboards. The door creaked, as if sighing. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run back into the fog, but my feet were glued to the floor. The pull was stronger now, whispering my name, soft, insistent. The air smelled of wet wood, of rust. A faint taste of iron lingered on my tongue. Every shadow seemed to twitch when I blinked. Every whisper pressed closer, layering over itself. I glanced at the door. It swung slightly, though no wind touched it. The fog outside seemed to pulse with each breath I took. The cabin, the air, it waited. I stepped further inside. The floorboards creaked under the weight of my hesitation. Dust stirred. A faint, metallic scent followed my movements. The corners were darker than they should be. Shadows shifted just beyond the eye. I felt a presence, unseen, patient, watching, waiting. A cold draft grazed my neck. It whispered across my skin. Static in the air, soft and lingering. I swallowed hard. The fog outside thickened further. The cabin's walls seemed to lean inward. Each creak of wood echoed far longer than it should. I realized then I was alone, and yet I wasn't. I froze. Breath caught in my chest. Footsteps behind walls or in the floor. I couldn't tell. Nothing moved. Everything waited. The door. It had shifted again. Almost closed. Almost inviting me back outside. But I couldn't move. I couldn't leave. The hum grew softer, then louder. It pulsed, synchronous with my own heartbeat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But only whispers came. Something pressed close in the shadows. Cold, intangible, patient. I felt it follow me with every step. The air thickened, pressed heavy in my chest. And then, silence. I took a breath. The cabin waited. The fog pressed. Closer outside, and I knew. I should have never opened the door.